Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How you all doing? And today I am so excited because I have a guest, which to say he's fascinating is coming up short. The gentleman that I have with me today is Robert Sullivan IV, and he's an author of several books and mostly about Masonic rituals, esoteric symbology in the movies. And Robert, he's originally from Baltimore, Maryland, and he attended Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania, and he earned his BA in history. He studied abroad at St. Catherine's College in Oxford University in England, where he studied European history and philosophy. He attended Widener University School of Law in their Delaware campus, and from there he received his Juris Doctorate. He's admitted to the State Bar of Maryland as well as District of Columbia. Now, he has been a Freemason, and he joined back in 1997 the Amicable St. John's Lodge number 25 out of Baltimore, and he became a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Mason in 1999. Now, his first book was The Royal Arch of Enoch. And what that dealt with was the impact of Masonic rituals, philosophy, and symbolism. And this was a product of 20 years worth of research. Now, he went on then to publish a book by the name of Cinema Symbolism. And that book, what he points out very adeptly is all the esoteric imagery that you see in just about every type of popular story, as in film, that you see today. And some of it, as a matter of fact, it's not even current. It starts sometimes as early as the films that were being produced in the 30s and the 40s, etc. So right now he's working on 5 books, and the last book that he produced, which is called Pact with the Devil, is his first nonfiction book. He has the Cinema Symbology. He has 1 and 2, because I think that once you start looking at movies, you realize apparently that there's symbology just about everything, some more than others, and of course not all of it necessarily is Masonic symbology, okay? Because as you know, there's symbologies attached to different belief systems, occult practices, religious beliefs. Some of them, they predate Christianity. They're not even all Judeo-Christian. You have some that are even Egyptian, etc. So anyway, let me go ahead and get this started, because believe me, I have heard Robert before on other interviews, and he is fascinating. His work is fascinating, and also his understanding is a real eye-opener about when you go to the movies and you look at these films, exactly what it is that you're seeing in more ways than one. So here we go.
With your subconscious mind on levels you're not even aware of.
Because what I'm thinking also is that it makes you think, is it something that let's go back to like these writers like Tolkien and which is like almost predates the time of cinema. And you're thinking, okay, they absorbed it from their religious teachings, from what they were learning when they went to universities and school. In other words, like you said, this is the mythology that's been handed down through the years, and now it's just basically gone 1,000 times more effective because you see it in film. Because
right. It's instead of hearing tales by a Greek bard or something, about Hercules. Now it's Luke Skywalker and Neo Anderson in The Matrix. It's just things being rebranded and renamed. And again, these movies can draw on themes. I mean, it's very deep. I mean, these movies can draw on themes of Gnosticism, ancient religion, mystery schools, alchemy, Kabbalah, Freemasonry, symbolism, numbers. All this is in play when you're watching these films. And what is key is, is to discover the context of the film. What's the movie ultimately about? What's going on in the movie? Is it the hero's journey? Is it the monomyth? Is it the story alchemical? Am I dealing with consciousness, conscious awakening? Am I dealing with, a magical adventure of some kind? Am I dealing with transition of the self? Is there numbers that are being repeated over and over again in the film? And if so, why? Why is the number 88, constantly, being used in Back to the Future? Well, there's a reason for that.
Which is? Which is?
Oh, it's a long story. That's a real long one.
Oh, okay.
No, I know it has to do with a lot of this. We get into the whole Christ, the resurrected sun, light versus dark. I mean, the whole Back to the Future movie is a retelling of the Egyptian Osirian mythology, where you clearly have George McFly as Osiris, Lorraine Baines as his virgin wife, Isis. Horus would be Marty. Of course, they do battle with Typhon or Biff Tannen. Even the name is phonetic. They live at Lion Estate, Leo the Lion, the solar family.
You're right.
When Marty drives the sun chariot, the DeLorean, it spits the fire and flames. This is Horus's comparison. Apollo, who drives the sun chariot. When he goes back in time in 1955, the thing is 88 miles an hour. We're told this over and over again.
Yes.
On its surface, if you take the number 8 and turn it sideways, you have the symbol for time and infinity. But is there a deeper meaning to this? When he goes back in time, what it is it's taking the DeLorean and turning it into a sun chariot. When he goes back in time, you'll hear this is bombarded at you over and over again. This is in the first movie, that the lightning is going to strike the clock tower at 10:04 p.m.
Right.
10:04, 10:04, 10:04, 10:04. This is told to you a dozen times. The 10:04 is a date. It's October 4th.
Yes.
And on October 4th, there's 88 days left to the sun year. So by investing in a car with 88 miles an hour, it's turning it into this solar chariot. By the lightning striking it at 10:04, it's turning Apollo's chariot into a sun chariot. Thus, the space-time continuum can be broken. Very esoteric imagery there. You clearly have the Doc Brown character as the Egyptian god Hermes, Trismegistus, the magician character.
Right.
It's interesting. I mean, there's some symbolism in it that goes by people. That's kind of on its surface. The first scientist to conjure time travel was Einstein. Hence, the dog Einstein is the world's first time traveler.
That's right.
If you pay attention to it, the entire movie loops. It literally goes back to the future. And this is something Zemeckis and Spielberg just love wreaking havoc with. If you watch the beginning of the movie, when you sit down to watch the very first Back to the Future movie, pay attention to the opening sequence. It's actually the end of the movie. You're focusing on Doc Brown's timepieces, and it goes through a whole slew of them. One of the pieces has a guy hanging off the clock hand, which is Doc Brown at the end of the movie hanging off the clock tower. Then it goes to another timepiece with a wino drinking wine, and that's Marty when he comes back meeting Red, the guy drinking the wine. Then it goes to the alarm where it goes off, and it says, this is when the actual electronic alarm goes off, and you're going to hear an ad for something called Statler Toyota. That's the Toyota dealership where Marty gets the car from at the end. Is Statler Toyota. So, and you'll see that in the film when he's standing in front of the clock tower. He says, "Hey Jen, take a look at that 4x4," and you'll see it brand new at Statler Toyota.
Wow! Oh my
movie God. Is the whole end of the movie. It's taken back to the future. When you watch, they do this throughout the whole films. When you watch Part 3, Back to the Future 3,
right.
When Marty goes back in time to 1888, when he's walking into Hill Valley, you're going to see a sign that says "Honest Joe Statler, horses bought and sold," and he's obviously the ancestor of the Toyota dealership guy. When in Part 1, this is again going back to the future, when Marty and Jennifer are standing in front of the clock tower, this is in Part 1, the store in the background is called the Third Eye, and it's a fortune-telling store. You go and you have your tarot cards read, palms read, it's fortune-telling. When Marty in Part 2 goes ahead to 2015 or 16 or whenever it is, I think it's 15, when he goes ahead to 2015, that same store now is Blast to the Past, which houses all the relics. So it's dualistic.
Wow.
In the present, it tells the future. In the future, it houses the past. And this is the sort of things these guys just love playing around with, in these films. And it's very esoteric, and it's very powerful.
And, on the face of it, you think of Back to the Future as a wholesome, very uh, very innocent kind of storyline is what I'm thinking of. Here's this kid that has this friend who's a scientist, and he goes back in time and he has an adventure, and then you look at what you're talking about. It's like, what? There's so much going on behind the scenes, and on the surface, it appears to be so easy to understand. I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, one of the reasons why I wrote the book was so that people can understand this when they're seeing these movies, that, we were dealing with ancient mythologies here. A lot of movies that people believe, a movie that can be, innocuous, can be overloaded. The Wizard of Oz is another one of these that is just dripping with symbolism. Child's movies, things designed for children, can also be dripping, be replete with esoteric imagery, or political allegory, some of the Walt Disney material. We're doing with a lot of fairy tales. Again, this is archetypal imagery. Some of this stuff comes out of the Counter-Reformation, and some of it can be very dark. Mm-hmm. When you're dealing with the subject, it's not necessarily the brooding. We could, horror movies have this. The Exorcist is all the William Peter Blatty, the film by Friedkin, The Exorcist, is overloaded with esoteric imagery that again, kind of tweaks at your subconscious mind. You're going to watch the movie 100 times and not see any of it. And again, it's not necessarily the esoteric imagery. I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's not limited to a genre. You can find it in comedies, you can find it in drama, action, adventure. Like you said, family fun movies.
Right.
You can find it in a whole slate of different films.
Right, and because there's certain films usually meant for adults that are categorized as deep films, but then there's like all these other films and stories, some of them that are based on novels or in some cases fairy tales, which you think are what you're seeing is what it's all about. And
right. Well, no, that's not the case, though.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's like, and I'm going to ask you because in the last couple of years, well, not couple, I want to say, there's been this huge, all these superhero movies. But a lot of them based on comic books that came out, 40, 50 years ago. I'm sure that's now based on what you're saying, they have got to be loaded down with all these different symbols.
Sure. Right. You're dealing with, again, depending on which one. I be honest with you, I am not as well versed just because I haven't seen them, like some of the Marvel ones.
Right.
So I haven't really studied them, and I really don't analyze movies. I'm not saying it's not there, but without seeing it, I can't really talk about it.
And it almost part of what you're saying is, and some of it, I'm thinking at it from the psychological. It's like fear of being ordinary. Like you said, the guy or the kid that maybe has an ordinary or maybe even undesirable life is in reality special, or has special parents or special powers or something special. And I guess the reason why I'm thinking of that is that we see it so much now, not only in movies but in shows. Just even the shows that they have on regular TV. I'm thinking it's like overdone. Like being ordinary is like the worst thing in the world because.
Well, yeah, the Batman. The Batman series is very psychological. A lot of this has to do with conscious ego and shadow self. You have mythology coming into this, with characters like Catwoman, who is clearly a Lilith, personification. Two-Face is the Roman god Janus. Superman, another DC comic, is Christ, is a Jesus, stand-in analog. Think about it, the only begotten son of, some
right.
god sent to planet Earth to save mankind from itself by performing miracles. You look at the Superman films. In the one with Christopher Reeves, the first one, he resurrects the dead. He brings, Lois Lane back to life.
Yes, you're right.
And in the one that came out, if you pay attention to this, Superman is constant. He's 33 years old. He says in the movie, which is obviously a reference to Jesus's age of the crucifixion. If you pay attention to the film, Man of Steel, Superman is constantly flying around cruciform in front of the sun. That is a clear Christian allegory right there. So, I mean, it just depends on the superhero movie. I get into this a little bit in both the movie books. Again, unfortunately, I'm not as well versed with the Marvel
Right.
material.
Right.
But no, I mean, the superhero is definitely archetypal. Religious. You name it, it's there.
Well, right, and it makes you think that now because I'm looking at it, even like I said, sometimes it's pretty obvious that there's something going on behind the scenes, but now after what you've explained, it's like everything that's produced has some type of symbology embedded in it, either to a very limited degree or it's everywhere, totally. And I don't know, have you seen this last series that came out? It's called Strange Things. It's like a throwback to the 80s, and basically it kind of tips its hat to all the different 80s movies, like all the ones that came out in the 80s from Steven Spielberg. And now I'm thinking back that you know it's using the symbology from all those 80s films to kind of like insert itself into a modern story.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, so without having seen it, I
Okay.
couldn't really comment. But I will say this: TV shows are not immune from this. There are some shows that were overloaded with symbolism. One of the shows that I enjoyed watching, and it just ended. It just ended with its fifth season back in April. Was a TV show that aired on A&E called Bates Motel,
Yes.
and it was like a play on Psycho
Mm-hmm.
by Hitchcock, and it was on for 5 years. And what was funny was for the fourth, I watched. I have all the Blu-ray here of all of them. The first 4 years were great shows. I mean, they were great, but really nothing esoteric going on
Okay.
until the fifth year came around. And the fifth year, the last year, was overloaded with stuff.
Really?
Um, yeah, and I sat back and I kind of was wondering why that was. Why they kind of ignored it for the first four, but really in the fifth year they overloaded it, and it hit me. I did figure it out. It's because in the fifth year the story caught up with Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. So by incorporating
Oh,
it,
okay. I see what
they
you're
were
saying.
they were sort of homaging Hitchcock by putting a lot of the things in the Hitchcock movie that was that he used.
Okay.
For example, I mean, I'll just get into it real quick. If you haven't
Sure.
seen the show, at the very beginning of season 5, the very first thing you saw was a record playing, and the record was put out, I believe, by Plainfield Records. And Plainfield Records is a reference to Ed Gein, who was a serial killer who was Norman Bates
Yes.
was based upon. And this was this is the Norman Bates from Psycho. So by putting that in there, it was referencing
Wow.
Psycho and Gein. So that was really interesting. But the fifth season of Bates Motel was overloaded, where the first four were not. And I was really kind of struggling. Why is that? Why is that? But it was because it had caught up to Psycho. And so they decided to do all the esoteric imagery going back to the Hitchcock film.
And you know what? And I'm glad you brought up Hitchcock. When you look at a Hitchcock film, it's almost like you know ahead of time that Hitchcock does that. That he
Oh,
puts
sure.
in all these things in there, so you know to look for them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Hitchcock uses symbolism in his films, no question about it. One of the things he does that he was almost obsessed with was in Psycho, and you'll find this in other movies as well. If the female character starts to go down a dark path, the clothing changes.
Oh, I got to look at that. Wow.
It's tans, and then they'll go to black. And when you'll find that in Psycho, when Marion Crane starts the movie out, she's running around in the white underwear. But after she steals the money, all her underwear is black.
Oh my
And you'll
God.
find that also in another one of his movies. He does it as well, where the character's wardrobe starts out, and you get that that's something else you can play around with is wardrobe. In Black Swan, for instance, what we were talking about earlier, if you pay attention to it, Nina Sayers, the virginal girl, all her clothing is white, tan. All the dark, or the Lily is all black. And the mother's all black. Everyone's wearing the dark clothing, symbolizing the dark side. If you ever watch the movie Fatal Attraction,
Yes.
the Glenn Close characters movies, clothing is black and white. That's all she wears is black and white, symbolizing, is she good or evil? She doesn't know.
Okay.
And if you watch that movie, everything she wears is either black, white, or black and white. signifying, good versus evil. That she's both at the same time essentially, and she doesn't know she's messed up. So yeah, I mean that's a whole
Yes.
other thing is the wardrobe. The characters wear sometimes can have esoteric imagery as well. So yeah, I mean it's a fascinating study, and
I'm thinking also now. Thinking about not only the clothing, the lighting, because and you're right. You think of some movies and they're always either filmed in rainy cities or overcast settings or very grayish kind of surroundings.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely true. Weather can be a technique that these people use. There's some great examples of that in film where the weather can wreak havoc with your mind. I'll go into two or three briefly. One is in the Omen movies, which is about the Antichrist.
Yes.
If you watch the first one, this is where the little boy's coming of age. If you watch the second Omen movie, this is where the Antichrist's power is growing. And of course, when the Antichrist, is darkness, the sun god is diminished. And if you watch the second Omen movie, it takes place in perpetual autumn and winter when the sun is at its weakest. There's no summer months or spring in the Omen 2. And in fact, in the Omen 3, when Christ comes back, it's at the vernal equinox when the sun defeats darkness and comes out of the vault of winter. So darkness is defeated and the light comes back. In fact, Omen 3 was actually released on the vernal equinox of 1980, signifying the death of darkness and the return of Jesus, or the sun, basically.
Wow.
Another trick that the same technique is used is in The Exorcist, where it starts off in the dark heat of the desert, and then we flip to Georgetown, and we have Chris McNeil going on. And this is something that's very adroit. Stanley Kubrick does the same trick in The Shining. Excuse me. In The Exorcist, Chris McNeil is walking back from the movie set at Georgetown University, and if you pay attention, she's accosted by a group of trick-or-treaters.
Yes.
What that is symbolically telling your mind is this is Halloween. Halloween is the halfway point between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice, when the sun is in death and darkness is taking over. Hence, From this point on, the demon can come out, wreak havoc in Georgetown, deface the Dahlgren Memorial. So hence we have this, by merely putting the trick-or-treaters there, your subconscious mind knows it's Halloween and darkness is coming. The darkness of winter, hence, darkness is defeated sunlight, light, the sun, hence the demons can come out to play. If you watch a few years later, pay attention to The Shining. When Jack Nicholson is sitting in Ullman's office and talking to him about becoming the caretaker, Ullman says, our normal operating hours are the middle of May to October 30th. So we know when Jack Torrance arrives at the Overlook, what day is.
Oh my God, you're right.
And it's the same thing. We know that darkness is on its way, the sun is dying, and what happens in the movie? We have winter, and we have the ghosts coming out to play in the Overlook. So these are the same techniques that these guys are using to prepare.
Right, they're using
death, ghosts, and
one of the things that because I did read the Stephen King the when he came out with The Shining, and then you look at the movie, and even though a lot of the things they do follow Stephen King's novel, there's a lot of things that he put into that movie which were not part of the book when you read it.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, if you look at that movie, I know this isn't in the book, obviously. The entire movie is repetition. Everything in that movie repeats constantly. If you watch The Shining, everything is repeating from start to finish, quite literally. The movie is and numbers from the very opening sequence to the end of the movie. And he also uses doubles, sets of doubles, again to convey repetition, to symbolize the same thing happening over and over again, which is what's going on inside the Overlook Hotel. It's endless repetition going on. I'm going to give you some examples of this if you want to hear.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
So, in The Shining, let's see here. Well, if you watch the movie, when Jack Nicholson is driving to the Overlook, he passes 4 cars. 2 are moving, 2 are stationary. So we have doubles. We have 2 sets of twins inside the Overlook, the little girls. And then when Ullman is showing them their quarters, 2 adult twins pass him. He says, have a nice, winter, girls. And they're twins. In the Overlook, we have 2 mazes, the actual hotel and the hedge maze outside. 2 Portlands are mentioned at the bar, Maine and Oregon. Jack Nicholson has 2 10s and 2 20s in his wallet.
That's right.
The number 12 repeats. There are 12 turkeys in the fridge. There are 24 pork roasts, which is 12 times 2. There are 12-pound bags of sugar. There are 12 jugs of molasses. The hotel is KDK 12. They take 12 turns in the hedge maze. 2 times are shown on screen. 8 plus 4, 8 and 4 o'clock. Add 8 plus 4 to get the number 12. Jack throws the ball against the wall 12 times. He hits the door 12 times with the axe. This is the sort of thing that is going on in The Shining. It is constant repetition, and it is completely designed by Kubrick to bombard your subconscious mind with. I mean, I give you other examples of this.
Yes.
Another number that repeats is 42. If you take a look at the hotel room number, it's 237. If you multiply it, you get the number 42. If you add it, you get the number 12. Danny, at the beginning of the movie, has the number 42 on his T-shirt when he's talking to Tony in the mirror. The movie that Shelley Duvall and Danny are watching in the hotel is The Summer of 42.
Oh my God!
The license plate on the license plate that Scatman Crothers is driving when he drives back to the Overlook has the number 42 on it. So this is the number 21 repeats. If you look at the end of the movie, the photos are arranged in 3 columns of 7. 7 times 3 is 21. The road that Jack Nicholson is driving on is called Going to the Sun Road, which was constructed in 1921.
Wow.
What is it? Jack Torrance arrives there 2.5 hours, which is 210 minutes. 21. Another number that's great in it is, it's not repeating, but this is something else that Kubrick liked to do, is when Jack Nicholson, Jack Torrance, and that's another thing, is the names repeat. Jack Torrance is Jack Nicholson.
Yes.
Danny Torrance is Danny Lloyd. The name, what is it? There's something else in there. I can't remember. But when Jack Torrance is sitting at the bar with Lloyd,
yes.
and he takes a drink of alcohol, and this is when the demons now start to enter him and everything goes right. He takes the drink of alcohol at 60 minutes, at 66 minutes, 6 seconds. 666 is when he takes the drink of alcohol.
Wow.
So that's something else. It's 666. So that's something else Kubrick does in the film. And that's when the demons start to take over.
Right.
So very esoteric with The Shining, loads of repetition. By all means, if you're interested in that, read the cinema books and then go watch the movie. Because
now it's like, now I'm thinking, oh my God, all these things are, because and this is one of the things. Now let me ask something. All these numbers that you mentioned, like the 12, the 42, were these important to Kubrick, or is there some type of mystical meaning to these specific numbers?
The number 12 is referencing the zodiac. There's an alchemical storyline with Jack being a fallen sun god. So we in the movie he has his downfall in the Golden Room, which is the sun. And if you pay attention to it, there's a very deep alchemical storyline of transition from failed author to psychopath. So we have the number 12 as a solar reference. 42 is the Bible. So I was talking to someone else. We think that Kubrick was trying to conjure biblical imagery, perhaps with The Shining. But he likes to, it's not only the numbers he repeats. If you pay attention to it, the characters will say lines back to themselves. When Danny first encounters the twins, the twin girls, they say something, "We want you to stay here forever and ever." Then a few minutes later, he's sitting next to his father on the bed, and Jack Nicholson says, "I want to stay here with you forever and ever." So that's repeating dialogue. When Danny and when Wendy are entering the Hesmaze, they say, "Keep America clean," and he says, "Keep America clean," right back to her. So the whole movie is just constantly.
And one thing that
let's see, there's the two sets.
Let me ask you something. At the very end of the movie, where it shows that where it does the close up of all the different the pictures of past events at the hotel,
right?
And it zooms in and it shows what looks like Jack back in, I think it was like 1921 or something like that.
Right, 1921. Right.
Right, and it makes you think like, okay, was this, because in part of the movie he says, "I feel like I know what's around the corner." Like, in other words, he's referencing like he's been there before.
Right, it's reincarnation.
That's what I was going with that. Yeah.
It's clearly he's been reincarnated there, and that's what all this repetition is. It's this symbolic, endless reincarnation that's going on. The murdering of the, of the twins again, the murdering of the family again. It's all repetition. It's all happened again. The guy says it to him. He said, you're the caretaker here. He said, you've always been here. He said, I know because I'm always here. So the whole movie that's what Grady says to him in the bathroom. So the whole movie is just constantly about repetition and this vicious reincarnation cycle that these characters are trapped in. That is the Overlook Hotel. Very, very fascinating study with The Shining. Very great movie.
No, let me tell you something. When you look at it, it's like, what, it's got to be every scene. It's like, now I've got to look at it 2-3 times, like, what is that there? There's got to be something going on there that has some type of meaning. That's just not their happenstance. There's got to be a reason for it.
No, it's definitely not there by happenstance. So this is all very intentional. And he the number thing, he changed the room number to 237, which I think it was another number in the book. And again, this corresponds with all his number symbolism. So it's definitely intentional.
And it's incredible though, because I would say 99.9% of people have no idea whatsoever that they're being played, for lack of a better word, on a subconscious level when they watch these movies.
That's certainly one way of looking at it.
It's like almost they're putting a hook in you
right.
to elicit, and it's almost like, because I've heard of, you've heard that they used to have subliminal commercials where they would put certain things behind the scenes that you could capture, your eyes would capture, but you wouldn't recognize. But I'm thinking to myself, forget these subliminal type of commercials. This is subliminal across the board.
Right. It's different than subliminal advertising, which isn't allowed because that's
Right.
being used to promote a product.
Right.
But what movies can do, and this isn't, I don't talk about this because this is well known and this isn't really esoteric. It's what's called product placement, where, like, for example, if a character's drinking a soda, Diet Pepsi will pay a certain amount of money to the filmmakers to put to have the character drink a Diet Pepsi or something. That's what's called product placement. That I don't talk about. That's kind of, well known. Interesting story with it though, that I'll just get into real quick. It's nothing esoteric, but it is kind of a strange, funny story. When they were making the movie E.T. in the early 1980s, they filmed that movie using M&Ms. Steven Spielberg filmed it using M&M candies. And when they were filming it, someone said to Spielberg, "Don't you need permission from M&Ms to use them?" He said, "Well, don't worry about it." He said, "M&Ms will be on board. This movie's going to be a blockbuster. We'll deal with that later." Well, someone at M&Ms got wind of it and showed up with a lawyer on the set. And they went up to Spielberg and said, "We understand you're using our product without asking us." And Spielberg said, "Yeah." He said, it's a plot device. The little boy eats them. He gives them to the space alien. And, I didn't think you'd care. And the lawyer said, "Space aliens don't eat. M&Ms are not consumed by space aliens. Take it out of the movie."
Oh, my God. Talk about the wrong move.
And it became, and Steven Spielberg said, "Okay, what else can we use?" And they went to Reese's Pieces. Yeah. And the rest is history.
Yes. Man, I bet that lawyer or whoever thought of that lost their job. He was like, "Why'd you do that?"
Yeah, who knew? Who knows? People make dumb mistakes all the time.
Let me ask you, and I'm gonna make with commercials. And sometimes I look at commercials, and it's like, if it's like, I'm gonna get into the business of writing sappy music, because, and I'm gonna give you an example. Let's say they're doing a commercial about a car, and you get sappy music, and your family's gonna be safe, and it's like, but tell me about your car. Tell me about your product. It's like, lately I've seen like a lot of the commercials go trending towards touchy-feely versus, the actual product information. And I'm thinking to myself, I know there's got to be some type of manipulation going on behind this, because everybody's doing it. It's like sometimes you look at the commercials and you're thinking, what was your product about? I mean, I remember the commercial, but it's like, what was that for? You're caught up more sometimes with the characters, especially that they develop in a series of commercials.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And it's almost like it's not what it does for you, it's how it makes you feel, unless you really think about what it is that you're purchasing. But yeah, I've seen a trend, and now I'm wondering, now you've got me thinking, okay, how deep does this thing also go with maybe even with commercials, because in some cases it's almost become like an art form, especially when they develop, certain characters that they use through different, years.
Sure. Well, I
Yeah.
mean that's there is there is music that it can induce you to there's music that has been selected specifically for when you're walking around a shopping center or a grocery store that
Yes.
has algorithms that induce purchasing or relax you or something like that.
Yes.
That's been well documented. Sure, I mean catchy jingles for TV commercials stick in your mind. I mean
Yes.
one of them who what is it? You deserve a break today. I mean who
Oh,
doesn't know that
yes.
one? I mean there you
Yes.
go. Sure. I mean commercials can be very, a catchy jingle can sell a lot of products if it's done correctly. I don't dispute that.
Well, no, and it's almost like in some cases, well, I know they've done this for a while where they have character development that identifies with a product, and it almost takes on a life of its own, or it makes the company like appear friendly, or you kind of identify that character with the company. It's almost like this is who we are.
Well, it's like a mascot, sure.
Yes,
I
exactly.
mean, you have like Mickey Mouse, you associate that with Walt Disney, of course, immediately. So yeah, Matt, the Michelin Man. So
Yes.
yeah,
Well,
Tony the Tiger.
and I'm thinking of, let's say you look at Geico, and it's got the little lizard, and some of
Right.
their commercials, I love them because they're hysterical. But they've got all these different versions, and especially the insurance companies, these characters that they develop to identify themselves, which in reality is just an insurance company. But you kind of relate to the character, and I mean, they even merchandise off these characters tremendously. And Rob, I know that we're coming to the end, but I wanted to ask you this because I know, I mean, I've heard about it before, but Disney. I know Disney, considering that you always think of they're aimed at family or children. But when you think about it, there's so many of their films, even the older ones, that yeah, you think of it as in they're based on fairy tales, for example, Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella and all these other films. But there's absolutely, I imagine there's got to be something in there, despite
Oh, sure. Yeah,
that
and
it's a
I
kids
talked
movie.
about Walt Disney in the second movie book. I did some of the movies. I'm gonna revisit Disney again because there's so many. I just couldn't cover them all. Sure, I mean the Lion King has loads of esoteric imagery in it. When you're dealing with the fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm, you're dealing with a lot of archetypal imagery, a lot of mythology, some very heavy religious tones going on.
Mm-hmm.
Disney does get a bit of a bad rap. Some of it is not as bad as people think. Where some of this comes from is in the late 70s and into the mid 80s, Disney kind of ran out of ideas. They didn't know what direction to go, and they started producing a series of films that were designed for adolescent children, teenagers, that were
Okay.
very dark. And what happened was there was a backlash. People were taking their young kids to see Disney movies based on the Disney brand, on the
Right.
Disney name, and these movies were not designed at all for younger children. I mean, you think of something like The Black Hole, or
Right.
the two Escape from Witch Mountain movies, or Something Wicked This Way Comes, or The Black Cauldron, or Dragon Slayer. These were movies that were very dark. I mean, and had a lot of very deep adult themes in them,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a backlash against Disney, and some of this is where this dark, sinister connotation with Disney comes from. I think it was '88 or '89, which is what is thought was what is generally referred to as the start of what's called the Disney Renaissance, where it
Okay.
was every summer. You'll remember this, where every summer, I think it was '89, Disney started putting out this grandiose, animated blockbuster smash hit with these musical numbers that just made a
Right.
year. The first one was The Little Mermaid.
Right. This is when all the princesses started coming out, all the storylines of the princesses or whatever.
Right,
Yes.
the first one was Little Mermaid. The biggie was in '94 was The Lion King. But then you had like Hunchback of Notre Dame, Pocahontas, Mulan. These were
Yes.
movies that sort of rehabilitated Walt Disney in the public eye. But no, I talk about the Walt Disney material in the book. By all means, check it out. I get into that in Cinema Symbolism 2. It's going to be something else I get into Cinema Symbolism 3. But no, Disney films definitely are not immune and without question have esoteric imagery.
No, I imagine that, yeah, it's hard not to think of, And it's just how much they, I guess. Let me ask you, have you ever come across real quick anybody that's produced a movie that did not do it intentionally?
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is something I talk about with this imagery coming out of the collective unconscious. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been asked this question before, and the example I always give is this goofy movie put out by this B movie filmmaker. His movies are actually very entertaining, but not for the reasons he anticipated. A guy named Ed Wood.
Yes.
And in his first movie that he released, it was a movie in 1953. It's this incredibly bizarre. I don't know what else to call it, but a transvestite apologia. Wood was a transvestite in real life, and he put out this movie in 1953 called Glen or Glenda. Make a long story short, it's about why it's this docudrama about why society should tolerate transvestism. But in this movie, he actually, and I don't, it's one of, I've been asked this before, it's one of the greatest examples of a Gnostic demiurge on film. If your listeners are not aware, the demiurge in Gnosticism is sort of the lesser god. He's the creator of mankind. He's the manipulator of mankind. And one of the greatest examples of a Gnostic demiurge you'll see on screen is in Glen or Glenda. Is the Bela Lugosi character who plays the god of the material world, who's manipulating mankind, pulling the strings to get mankind to do what he wants, to satisfy his narrow ego. And I know that Wood didn't have the faintest clue what a Gnostic demiurge was. I mean, I know that just from reading books about him. But there it is, this great example of this Gnostic demiurge on film that I believe appears there as a product of Wood's unconscious mind, called the collective unconscious, where Wood is creating this Gnostic demiurge, but he had no idea what he was doing. So that would be an example of something that was unintentional, but had this great resonance, this great effect to it. So yeah, it can occur, by happenstance.
Right, because all these producers and these directors, they're always asked, "Oh, where do you draw your inspiration from?" And they'll all say, "Oh, when I was growing up, let's say for example, Spielberg. Oh, I saw the Hammer films when I was growing up," and they talk about all these different things or movies or books, whatever, that they were looking at when they were kids. And I'm thinking to myself, how much of this is they themselves were embedded with certain symbols, and then they produce based on whatever they want to produce, whatever their psychological makeup is for whatever reason. But then I'm thinking, there's got to be a bunch of those walking out there that have produced maybe not as, embedded like what you said and everything, but that they subconsciously produce, whether it's even books, storylines, movies, everything, based on what they took in subconsciously on a subconscious level. That's super interesting.
Yeah, you could definitely look at it like that.
Us human beings, boy, I'm telling you, and it's really, it's almost like, okay, how would you ever keep yourself from this? It's like, what, move to a mountain and don't watch TV ever? It's like, there's just no way to get away from it.
Well, I like watching it because I like trying to decode it. So it's
fun for you,
me.
No, I can imagine. It's like, okay, I got to watch that all over again, and just to see, I got to look at what's going on in the background. And it's true, you're absolutely right. I've picked up on things not as deep as what you do, but yeah, after I watch it a few times, sometimes I do pick up on certain things, because it's almost like I can switch my eyes off the main characters and look off to the sides or in the background and pick up on things that the first time you're watching it, your attention is drawn just strictly to what the characters are doing on screen.
Right.
Wow, Rob, this has been such an eye-opener. It's like, and it's ultimately it's about manipulation, intentional or unintentional or whatever the case might be. Whatever the intention is of the person producing it. And you said that also this last book, Pact with the Devil, you already have a prequel and a sequel planned to go with that?
Right. Well, right now I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm actually writing on 5 books at once.
What?
Yeah, well, I'm actually working on another book on Freemasonry called Freemasonry and the Path to Babylon. I'm outlining Cinema Symbolism 3, and I'm working on a sequel and a prequel to, I'm working on a sequel to A Pact with the Devil. The prequel is part of another string of stories that I'm going to do that are sort of backstories, backdrops to the Pact with the Devil stories to get into some of the background of some of the lesser characters.
Okay.
right now, actually, I can't get too specific with this, and it's just not with you; it's with anybody.
Okay.
I'm actually somewhat committed to writing another book. Unfortunately, I'm bound by a non-disclosure agreement right
That's
now,
okay.
and I can't get into it at all. It's well, just with anybody. This will probably be coming to fruition, and probably, hopefully, in the next coming months, I could probably start talking about it as this comes out of the bag. But right now, I just can't get into it. So, but what's going to wind up happening is, if things play out the way I think they will, this book is going to take precedent, and the others are just going to have to go to the side. I'm going to get this book out, try to get it out as soon as possible, and the others will just have to be put on the back burner for the time being. This would become my number one project, but unfortunately, I just can't talk about it right now.
I understand. I'm thinking to myself, I know that you've probably, based on your readings and your experiences, is there anything that you draw inspiration from? Let's say when you are, because I know some of, based on your work, let's say if it's nonfiction, it's based on research and experience in some cases, and then it's, if it's fiction, it's inspiration. Is there anything that you could say this has been what's influenced me the most as far as when I'm going into a creative state of mind? Because five books, that's a lot.
The only way I can answer that is, I can tell you this, that none of my, if I hadn't joined Masonry, none of my books would exist.
Wow.
That I can tell you. Because the Royal Arch is the one that really got me started with this. And what I did was, the Royal Arch was, like you said, 20 years of researching the occult, mysticism, symbolism, mythology, ancient religions, comparative religion. And essentially, Marlene, what I did was, when I got done with Royal Arch, I took this 20 years of experience. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not trying to sound trite, but I literally turned it on Hollywood. I just took this knowledge and this education that was kind of self-taught and just turned it to Hollywood and started breaking these movies down on an esoteric level when it appeared in a movie. So I would definitely say my involvement with Freemasonry was a big one. But, certainly, my experiences, like you said, my friends, when I'm writing fiction, obviously the people have to be fictitious. But,
right.
Like, for example, when in A Pact with the Devil, the story opens in England at Oxford University, which of course where I was. I mean, I don't think I would have done that had I not gone over there.
Right.
When I was over there in London, there is this very Gothic and overrun cemetery called Highgate Cemetery, which is this just absolute incredible Victorian era Gothic cemetery that's completely overgrown. And you can't describe it. You have to see it to believe it. And the cemetery is sort of a character in the book.
Wow.
And I know that wouldn't be the case if I had not gone there.
Of course, if you hadn't seen it firsthand.
You got it. You absolutely got it. So, all that I take, my experiences, my reading, other works of fiction. I mean, if you read A Pact with the Devil, I mean, you're going to clearly see homages in there to Sherlock Holmes. I mean,
okay.
Things like that. I mean, there are hidden things in the book. I don't want to get into it, but you should pick up on some stuff going on inside the book. So yeah, I mean, this is all something I draw inspiration from. I mean, and it's something I like doing. And like I said, there's 4 books out right now, and I have more on the way. It just depends on what happens in the coming months. We'll see what happens next.
Rob, let me ask you real quick. When you started, like you said, when you turned all the knowledge that you had about symbolism, were you surprised when you started looking at movies that you took a second look?
No, I wasn't.
You weren't surprised?
I was to an extent. Well, here's what happened. When I wrote Royal Arch, the last chapter I did in the Royal Arch focused on movies that dealt with predominantly solar and Masonic themes. The National Treasure films, which are very Masonic, but more than you're seeing on the surface. Movies like Excalibur, the King Arthur Ledger's Solar, the Da Vinci Code has a lot of hidden meaning in it that's beneath the surface. And I knew going in that, like, movies like the Matrix trilogy had Gnosticism or was a Gnostic theme movie. I knew from listening to interviews with Star Wars that he was influenced by Joseph Campbell. I knew from watching The Exorcist that there was this whole interplay with light versus darkness with it. So I knew a little bit, going into it that, of other movies I wanted to take on. The one thing I guess that kind of surprised me with all this was, in some movies like The Shining or the Aronofsky films, to the great lengths these guys will go to hide stuff in films. That took me back.
Okay.
When you see like the February 12th date, I mean, that's not an
Right.
act. That's what kind of, was sort of mind blowing for me. And that to me is also where, it's intentional. I mean, something like that's not a coincidence. That's impossible. So yeah, I mean, for me, it was just analyzing the movie. And again, just to wrap up, I only analyze movies that I'm a lawyer, so I would only present this material to a judge and jury. That's sort of the standard I held myself to.
Okay.
If I'm not convinced it's there, I don't talk about it.
You know what? And I'm hoping you're going to come back and talk to me again. And one thing I would love to talk to you about, and I know that you said, and you're, I don't know how you spare a minute for anything, to be honest with you, is one trend that I see that the usual villain is almost like the anti-hero now. In the latest trends, becomes the hero. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is what's called. I mean, you're absolutely right. This is the anti-hero character, where it's a villain, but he's like a good guy that people are rooting for.
Right. Like all of a sudden, before traditionally, this character would have been the villain all the way through. Okay. Right. And all of a sudden, I've seen this trend, like in the last few years, where the anti-hero almost becomes the hero. Like, how did that happen?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a very powerful archetypal image. Probably the most famous, I would say one of the most famous anti-heroes out there is probably Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Severus Snape in
Yes.
Harry Potter would kind of fall into that category. Yeah, absolutely. It has to do with Jungian psychology, what's known as the shadow persona, and the dark side. That why is it that I mean, it's everyone likes the villain character. Darth Vader.
Right.
It has this tragic background to him. So this is something that people really relate to.
Yes.
And
yeah, like all of a sudden they give that reason why he's such a bad guy, or why he does what he does.
Right. And it's usually if you do it correctly, and I think I did it in the book. A lot of times the villain character has no clue they're the villain.
Right.
They think they're acting nobly, and they think they're doing the right thing, or whatever.
Yes.
But of course they're not. But a lot of times they think, hey, we're not doing anything wrong. We're all good and fine.
Oh yeah, no, and like I said before, you would see it on and off, and sometimes when they would put it, they didn't make him the hero, but you almost kind of felt sorry for the villain in a way. But now it's gone totally where he ends up being the hero, or and I'm going to give you real quick a perfect example. And I know you might not have seen it, which is a movie that came out like about a year ago called The Suicide Squad. And it's and they're all anti-heroes totally. They're all bad guys in the universe of all these heroes. These are all the bad people. And they become the heroes in this movie and of course, they're sent on the suicide mission because they're considered expendable because they're worthless.
Sure, I saw the movie. Yeah,
Okay.
I totally agree. I totally agree with that. No question.
So, yeah, that's interesting. Okay, Rob, thank you so much. I've so enjoyed this. This is wonderful. I would love to have you back. And I
Sure.
know it sounds like you're so busy. Hats off to you. My God, that's incredible.
Well, thank you. No,
Thank
let me
you.
just say thank you for having me on. Would you like me to give my webpage out real quick? Or do you want
Yes.
to put it in the
I am going
description?
to put it in the credits of the show, but absolutely,
That's fine.
yes.
No,
Go
just real quick. If you like the interview, just the easiest way to find me and my books, just go to my website. My website is my name. My name's Robert W. Sullivan IV. So my website's www.robertwsullivan.iv.com. Like Marlene said, it's in the description, so you can find it there. Links to buy the books, links for information about me, upcoming appearances, webcasts I'm going to be on, including this one. Just go there, www.robertwsullivan.iv. Very easy to navigate.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was great to have you on.
Well, thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. So, oh my God, this man is so fascinating. He's so fascinating. I could have had him on for hours and hours and hours and hours. He'd probably I'm hanging up on you. He's great. He's fantastic. I have heard interviews that they've had with him in other shows, and I thought, I wish he would come and be on my show, and I'm so happy he did. Yay! But no, seriously, I'm I know from practical experience how powerful the subconscious mind is for humans, for both in the positive and in the negative. Um, and despite that, what we think that it's our logical minds that makes decisions, in reality, it's our subconscious mind that's in the driver's seat. And I learned this a lot in my practice, especially as a hypnotherapist, where people would either try to do or not do certain things, certain habits, and they couldn't understand why. If they logicked it, they couldn't do it or stop doing it. And it's because their subconscious, and I mean, that's a whole different thing as far as pain and pleasure and the way your subconscious mind works, fear of change, etc. But the point being that it's incredible how all these directors and producers, whoever it is that are coming out with these stories, because that's all they are, they're storytellers, learn how to imbue their version based on what they want to produce. Because I'm sure, like he said, all the symbology, yeah, besides the fact that the symbology is there, it's what symbology is being used in the background, either obviously or peripherally, or, like I said, even the music. And a lot of people don't realize, especially that a lot of the beats of these movies, they will put you into a light hypnotic trance and you don't realize it. And what happens is that when you're sitting there and you're watching this movie, let's use Star Wars, why not? That basically that you find yourself in there. Part of that induction is the music that you're listening to. In other words, if right now you saw Star Wars or any of these big blockbuster films with no music, just the dialogue, I guarantee you, they would not be as popular or as impressive that people would go back to see it and tell everybody to go see it. I guarantee you it wouldn't. A lot of it has to do the state of mind that you're put in when you listen to the music. And believe it or not, and like I told him, when you hear the theme from Jaws, you're like, okay, I'm getting out of the water now. And what that does is that music puts a hook in your subconscious mind. Right now, I could listen to the theme from Star Wars or from any of the other big movies, that they have. And it immediately comes to mind. And what people don't understand is your mind speaks to you in symbols. And that's why sometimes we have dreams. When you dream, you don't dream in words. You dream in pictures and symbols and people. And sometimes you have dreams where, you understand it's people you know. But I'm sure everybody's had these really wild dreams that don't make sense, or with people and things that you've never seen or don't know. And sometimes you have people say, I even remember that I dreamt in color. And it's 9 times out of 10, this is your subconscious mind talking to you the best way it can. And chances are that before that, your subconscious has been trying to give you a message, like I said, a tap on the shoulder. And one of two things, you haven't been paying attention to it, or you have not been ready to process or bring to the surface what it's trying to tell you in your dreams. That's why it's very important that you go into REM sleep so that you do have these dreams. And one other important thing is that it also clears out your mind. So that you kind of get in other words, sometimes the symbology is you're working out your fears. And sometimes on a daily basis, what you're doing is you're processing what you did at work. And sometimes you have crazy dreams. And sometimes it's really obvious, you dream about your boss, a coworker, and it's like no mystery there. And other times you have really weird dreams, and it's just your subconscious working it out. But the point being that all these storytellers, again, whether they're, let's face it, visually is much more impactful than when you're reading it, unless you have a great imagination like me. But they know they're hooking you in there because they seem to understand what or how powerful your subconscious is, whether it's to buy a product, to get enraptured with that storyline, to come back and see the sequels. And in some cases, and I'm sure you've all seen it, all the merchandising that goes along with all these movies. Okay? The figures, the lunch boxes, the costumes, the blankets, the sheets, the curtains. Think about it, guys. It also, we could think of it as esoteric, and I'm sure a lot of it is, which is why I asked him, do these symbols, are they just meant as a form of communication between, let's say, people in a society, let's say like the Freemasons, or is there actually some type of power within that symbol? And I think in some instances it does. But whatever the case might be, it all boils down to manipulation and what they're trying to tell you or spoon feed you behind the scenes. So sometimes I think it's a good idea to really understand what you're looking at, just not from the entertainment point of view. Or if you have kids, what is it that they're really seeing? What is it that they're learning from it? Or what's the intent of that storyteller in telling what looks like what he was saying, these Disney movies that sometimes, or Back to the Future. Oh my God. I'm always thinking Back to the Future is the most innocent, very easy to understand what the purpose of it is. And just in those few minutes, he described all these things that I got to go back and look at it again now, that you just don't know to look for it. Absolutely. His books, I mean, if you're into this, definitely you have to pick up his books. And I got to look at that last one, that last one he came out with, which, wouldn't it be great if they produced a movie out of this book that he wrote, Pact with the Devil, the fiction? That would be fantastic, because it sounds like such an interesting book. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for viewing. Please subscribe to my channel. Please hit the like video, or if you're listening to this on podcast form, please, save my, save my channel or wherever it is that you're listening to it, whether it's Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn. I mean, I'm all over the place, guys. If you look for me, you're going to be able to find me. And again, message out to my true believers. If you've got a true story, I would love to hear from you. You can film yourself with your phone, record it, MP3 file, or just email it to me at marlene@miamighostchronicles.com. And if you've got a lot of stories, we even get together and I will do what I do now, get you on Skype, whatever you feel comfortable with. And you're going to see in some of my shows that are going to come out, as a matter of fact, by the time you see this, you already have seen some shows that I've produced with people that I've gone and I've interviewed them in person, and they've fantastic stories. So believe me, I don't hold judgment. Is it true or is it not true? Is it fantastical? I just want to hear it. Believe me, guys. You are all the source of the best, most interesting stories, whether it's a ghost story, urban myth, sometimes true life. Maybe it's something that, story that your family's been retelling each other for generations, all of that. So again, guys, take care. And again, thank you so very much for being part of my audience. Bye-bye.